Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started here today. I'm just going to work out a sample estimate for a residential landscape contract. It's that time of the year. People are definitely looking for quotes, and I thought we could just kind of run through what it might look like to create a very simple residential landscape estimate. And also kind of talk through why it would be so important maybe to get into certain neighborhoods and really improve route densification kind of using this technique, because I think it's pretty easy once you've created an estimate like this to duplicate it and really, you know, try to improve route densification and add more contracts in the neighborhoods that you're already working in. So with that, we're gonna get started, and we're gonna create a service estimate. So I'm just gonna open up a service estimate here, and I'm gonna add the customer, and I'm gonna pick maintenance as my division, and I'm gonna pick a customer that's already in the system just to avoid wasting time on that. So I've got my customer in. I've already quoted some work in the past. Address is in and whatnot, so I'll pick that one. Now, first things first, I want to make sure the address is right, because I'm going to use my site measure tool to check out the size of the property and better understand quantities before I start estimating. So first thing I'm going to do is measure the site. So I bring that property up, and I'm going to first off get started by measuring the overall area of the property. So I want to get a size on the entire property. So off the start, that tells me my total area is basically 12,000 square feet. And then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to reset that, and I'm just going to measure the house and the hard surfaces, so I have a better idea of what I'm dealing with there. So the house is 2,000 square feet. Then I'm going to want to measure that driveway as well, because if I'm going to measure the property out properly, you know, I don't want to have to go out there necessarily to do this type of work, and it's not going to take us long to take a few minutes and measure it right this way, and then it becomes so much easier to get an accurate price for the customer. So I've got another 2,000 square feet there. I'll clear that. Now I'm going to go back into my estimate now, knowing that the property is about 8,000 square feet. So when I know that I've got 8,000 square feet of sort of turf area, combination of bed area, I could get more precise and really hone in on that and really, you know, try to look closely at beds and whatnot. But being realistic, with Google, you know, you can only get so close. But I can get a good sense of the property, and what I'm going to do next is come into my estimate and get started with a proposal. Now, in most cases, you're going to also view the site. You're not going to just simply price it over the internet when it comes to looking at beds and pruning and really giving a real solution for the property, obviously. But if I'm sitting there on the property, I think that tool is particularly helpful rather than pulling a tape out. It's a lot faster to get that overall site size. So I'm going to get started with adding some services now. So first off, I'm going to add mowing. So I'm going to call that weekly mowing. And if I want to price that per season, I'll click per season, or if I wanted to price it hourly or per visit, I could do that as well, but I'm going to say per season here. I'm just going to say 30 cuts. It varies a lot area to area. I'm going to apply a grounds maintenance cost code. Your cost codes can be completely customized, of course. And once I've got that up, it's up to me now to kind of assess how long everything's going to take, or maybe it's easier just to use a template. So I'm going to just open up templates, and I'm going to click residential mowing. And now what I'm going to say is, once I'm in my mow, I'm going to want to look and say, I'm going to probably add some labor. I might want to add maintenance labor, for example. If I'm going to build a template for the first time, I might want to add a crew truck with a maintenance trailer for that type of work. And I could template this, or I can build it out manually, which I'm going to do here right now, and say, okay, that property is going to take us the crew of 2. They're going to be there for a half an hour, so I'll just say it's 1 hour, and the truck will be there for a half an hour. So I've got my mowing figured out. If I've never templated that before, I could definitely save this as a template, or I could build a template for the first time ever. If I haven't templated that, I could save it very easily here and call that residential mowing, so that I don't have to kind of compile it again. But I mean, at the end of the day, what I'd probably be doing is using templates to expedite things and building those ahead of time. I wouldn't probably build them on the fly like this, but nonetheless I can. So what that's told me here now is I'm going to cut 30 times. My cost is $30 per cut. My break even is $56, and I'm going to quote this at $62.75 to earn a 9.8% profit. Next up, I'm going to say I'm going to add bed maintenance into the mix here. So I can call that weekly gardening. And again, I'm going to do that 30 times, or I want to quote it at least for 30 times. And now when I get into my templates, I want to look at templates that I might have that suit that. If I don't have one, which, sorry, I don't think I do have one in here, I'm going to build one out for the first time. And I'm going to say, I'm going to add my items. And again, I'm going to go with maintenance labor. I'm going to add that crew truck and trailer. And here we're going to say, same thing here. I think the crew is going to need a little bit more time. Let's say the gardens were fairly intricate. I'm going to say 2 hours, but the truck's just going to be there for an hour. And I'll go ahead and add that into the quote. And now over here on my little summary, it's telling me that that's $125 per visit. Now let's have 2 gardeners there for 1 hour, so 2 people for an hour. That might seem a little steep to a lot of clients, and it probably is. You got to think about it, whether they actually need that 30 weeks. So I might want to just kind of edit that and say, I don't know if I'm going to be able to sell it based on that. I think I could probably say I'm going to do gardening every other week and change my number of visits. So I'm not going to do it 30 times. I'm just going to do it 15 times. But I don't think I can really do it properly if I shave the time, so I'm going to leave the time where it was. And now the price for the year is going to be a little bit more reasonable. So again, right now I've got that price per visit. If I wanted to put that in seasonally, that would be very easy to do as well. I could have set it up as a seasonal price. just by clicking here. And you can always go back and change these around. Maybe the customer doesn't want to do it that way. They just want to pay per hour. I could do it that way as well. And lots of companies have good success selling kind of a low base monthly contract and then adding extra services like weekly gardening by the hour. So I'm just going to put it to per season here for now. And then next up, I'm going to look at, let's say mulching. I'll add mulch into the equation because let's say that the consultation with the customer, they sort of showed interest in mulch. So now I'm in my mulch here. I'm going to click a calculator here and go over to templates to try to speed this up a little bit. And I'm going to say I'm going to use my mulch installation template. And when I click that one, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click my production rate calculator to save me having to pull out a calculator and think of how much mulch there's going to be. So if I walk the property and I figure there's around 1,500 square feet of garden beds, I'll just simply enter the quantity. And then I'm just going to, based on that quantity, because now the calculator's told me I'm going to need 15 yards at a 4-inch depth, I'm going to just say I'm going to be installing 15 yards to come up with my labor quickly. And same with my truck. The production rate calculator save a lot of time on items like this. And now I've got my annual mulch application price in here for 2,400 with my cost and break even. And that I've got priced with a little bit more profit. It was already preset that way. I could always adjust that if I wanted to, but for now I'm just going to leave these items this way. Now next up I might say I want to include fertilization. Maybe they've asked for a package, so I'll just say fertilizer application. Now here I might want to go per visit and say I'm going to offer 3 applications over the course of the year. Now, again, this is one where you're going to want to create templates if you haven't already. But when I open this item, I'm going to go into template. The reason we want templates here is it's pretty hard to calculate how much fertilizer we're going to install every time we're creating a price. We want to be able to kind of systemize that so we can move quickly. So next up, I'll just click my residential fertilizer application. And again, I'm going to start with my calculator. I'm going to say it was an 8,000 square foot lawn. I'm going to use the calculator for the labor and equipment as well. And that's just going to simply do the math for me, make things simple. So I'm going to save that. Now my fertilizer price to the customer has just come up at $48.53 with a 31.8% profit. And the reason the profit margins are different here is when we built these calculators, maybe we put more profit on certain items, and that's really what you're kind of seeing. And there is some fluctuation, and that's just the way we built these out in advance. So in other words, if I think I have the ability to charge a little bit more on fertilizer applications and make a higher margin than I would say on a service like weekly gardening, I can make that adjustment as I build my templates and get my profit margin sort of set within my template so that I'm always bidding with the profitability that I want. And I don't really need an expert doing my pricing. Provided they can measure and use these work area templates, they're set to go out and do pricing rather than really relying on sort of intuition and industry experience to kind of drive accuracy in estimating. Next up, I might want weed control. Let's say the customer wants the lawn sprayed within the package. And again, this is kind of a customized package. Maybe we've had a consultation with this customer and they're really sort of set on a certain series of products. The other great way to do it, obviously, is to build one big template where you just kind of price all of these jobs with your regular package items included. And that makes kind of things even more streamlined when it comes to pricing and delivery. But for this example today, I thought we'd sort of, custom build a quote for a customer. So in this case, weed control, it's per visit. We're going to say we're going to spray the lawn twice. And we could say weed control for turf areas here. So again, if I already have a template, it's going to be a lot easier because, as you all know, it'd be pretty impossible every time we quoted weed control on turf area to be calculating how much chemical we're going to put down. It's just not reasonable to go that way. So we want to build these templates in advance for the products that you're using. And here we've got weed control on turf. And okay, this example is par 3. I'm going to say the lawn that we're going to spray is 8,000 square feet. And we've got, it's calculated the number of liters that we're going to need for the property automatically, because again, we don't want to have to do that manually. And now we know that we're going to be there for a half an hour based on the lot size. So I'll save that item. And what we're going to have here next is, oh, looks like I might be having a bit of a connection issue. Sorry if that's getting a little fuzzy. Okay, so next up here, I've got my price for the customer worked out for my turf control spraying. And now, the customer wants obviously to look at the price. The next thing I'm going to do before I get to price is I'm going to think of, first off, is this priced appropriately? So what's my gross profit? I want to look at my analysis for this one estimate and look at my profitability for this specific estimate, make sure that it's good. So I've got 48% gross profit. My net profit across all items right now is 13.3%. The estimate revenue per man hour is going to deliver $84 per hour, and my throughput is going to be 75.64. So overall, my budget that I priced this based on was my company budget only had 9.8%. This estimate's 13.3. So I can say, pretty safe to say that this is going to deliver according to the plan that I've set out for the year. The budget gross profit versus the estimate, again, it's a little better. The estimate's at 48 and my budget's only 39. So I can kind of confidently say this is a good estimate for the company. The price to the customer is $63.71. My gross profit, cost of goods sold are broken down, my overhead recovery. I know my break even, and I also know what my net profit is. So I've got a good understanding of whether or not the job is going to be good to the company. And now I might want to, just before I start to present the price, go into the client notes and make some adjustments. So first off, I might want to click on the estimate notes. This is obviously a good opportunity to address any specific concerns that they may have had. Kind of talk a little bit about something on a more personalized level. My estimate header terms and conditions, This might be something that's a little more standardized. I can pick from my standard list. And once you've got these prepared, it's pretty simple to kind of click and drag which ones that you want to use into the system. So once I've kind of gone through the process and I've decided what all my notes are going to look like, you know, I might want to add some crew notes for the customer, or sorry, for the crews. Maybe there was some promises made or some things, some warnings that the customer had. But back over to the client notes, I might want to add in my terms and conditions for grounds maintenance. So these can be fully customized again to suit your own company. We've got some basic samples in the system that you can start with and then add to, obviously. But for each of your areas, you might have specific terms and conditions or notes to do with each service, or sort of an explanation for each service. This is where you'd add those. So once I've kind of gotten comfortable with my analysis and I feel like my notes are up to par, the next thing I'm going to do is prepare a proposal. So I'm going to go into my reports, and I'm going to just go to service proposal, since that's the type of work this one is. And, you know, there's all kinds of options here that we can explore. So we could use a letterhead mode if you're going to print this on letterhead, or depending on how you're going to send it out. The pricing options, we can do all kinds of things automatically with these reports to kind of explain the work the way you like to explain it to your customers. So lots of little options here to look at. We might want to hide the client notes. We might not want to have those on there at all. We might not want to have a signature page. There's different things like that. Or we might want to kind of, you know, hide the page footers altogether. So I'm going to just hit submit and kind of leave things status quo. And now what it's kind of done here is prepared a bit of a summary for each item. So weekly mowing, it's priced per season. We've got our price. The client kind of understands the difference between the weekly packages, which here I've got weekly mowing, weekly gardening, and then I've got extra services that are not included in the monthly payment, but they will be added to the invoice each month. So mulch application, fertilizer application, weed control application. Very simple, you know, presentation. And again, fully customizable. You can always present this different ways yourself for your own style. And then, you know, my terms and conditions that I added in are all here. Again, they're samples. You would customize those for yourself. And, you know, a simple approval page attached as well. But the key thing being, as you build your estimates, always remember it's much easier when you're trying to sell, you know, 12 payments of $313 per month, and then just simply have the extra items listed more like a shopping list. I think it makes it a lot easier to sell the work, build some comfort with the customers. And, you know, throughout the season, if mulch seems really expensive at $2,400 to the customer, throughout the season, you know, it may sort of, you know, their opinion may change, and then it's already priced. It just makes things a lot easier, I feel, when there's kind of this shopping list. But every company has their own, you know, go-to-market strategy and their own technique. The point is, we really built the software so that it would be super flexible to allow you to do that for yourself throughout the year. I'm just going to kind of zip back over to services and pricing for a minute. If as you're building quotes, if you want to kind of at any point template anything or create your own sort of production rate templates, it's easy for you to do that when you're building a template for the first time. So I'm going to use weekly mowing as an example because I hadn't done that previously. So weekly mowing, I kind of built it up for the first time here, so there is no template in the system. So I'm just going to pretend first time ever. I'm going to save it as a template. I'm going to say residential mowing is going to be the name of the template. And really all I'm doing is copying what I had already put into the system. So now that I've copied that and templated it, next time I go to use a similar estimate, I can very easily just grab that template and it's already going to be sitting there. But that said, maybe that template needs a little bit of work. This is where I think sometimes people really aren't using the system to their advantage, in the sense that, you know, ideally we do things once and then we systemize it and it becomes a little more automated in the future. So if this is a template that I think I'm going to use on an ongoing basis, I might want to open up my templates and really sort of have a good close look at those templates to make sure that in the future everything is very useful to expedite my estimating time. So I'm going to pull up that residential mowing template, and I'm going to edit it and just make sure that it's accurate and flexible. So I'm going to say, what items do I have in here right now? Well, I put in maintenance labor and my maintenance truck and trailer. But, you know, rather than have to think about it every time in the future, I think I want to create a production rate. And this is, again, this is where sort of the expert in the company can put their logic into the system. And then in the future, other people who may not be, who may not have the expertise can just simply update square footage and really get the pricing without putting a lot of effort into the system. And you might want to dial this in and say small residential, medium residential, estate residential, and create some different ones. I think residential mowing might be a little casting a wide net, but nonetheless, I'm just going to kind of discuss this so that it makes sense. So if I wanted to say, provide a rate based on square feet. So if I know that I want to be able to do, let's say that 8,000, we'll just use that house for that measurement that I've been looking at. So if we know that it takes, for 8,000 square feet, it takes us 1 hour, 1 man hour, that would be 2 people for a half an hour, to cut that property. I could save that, and then it would always be there in the future. On the maintenance truck and trailer, same thing. I could say the installation rate is 8,000 square feet for every man hour. And now the next time that I go to use that, it's going to be sitting there with that already in mind. So I'm just going to go back to the estimate and kind of show you what that would look like, because it wasn't there when I went to estimate, and I think it would have been a lot easier and faster. Now I'll open that estimate back up. Now mowing was already in because I put it in manually, but I'm going to just add it again. So I'm going to say weekly mowing, and I'm going to price it per season again and say that we're going to go at 30 times. And now, rather than kind of build it up manually, I'm going to have my template already ready. So I'm just going to click residential mowing because that's the one we just worked on. And now you'll notice I'm just going to use the calculator. So I could say I want to use my residential mowing calculator, and I can say that there's 8,000 square feet. And there's 500 feet of linear mowing, and there's, in this case, we've got it per acre for cleanup, but it would automatically calculate the total man hours based on these installation rates that it previously built. So I can update that on the estimate, and it's got my time, and you know, I know my truck is also going to be needed. Oh, that one's not set up. So my truck, I'm going to say, is going to be there for half that time if it's a crew of 2. I'll save it. And I've kind of, at that point, kind of taken what I did manually, kind of thinking through it, and I've kind of systemized it in a way where somebody who just knows how to, more or less use the site measuring tool or a manual measuring tape can build that quote up and come up with basically the same price, $50 for that cut, without having, a lot of experience or know-how to do that, because somebody with a lot more know-how has already built that template up. So those are sort of the things that I wanted to cover today. But more than anything, what I wanted to say is once you've kind of got these packages in mind, it becomes a lot easier for me to do things like work on route densification. Because if I kind of go back to my site map and I say, well, look at this neighborhood, very similar size lots in this neighborhood. And I've gone to the trouble of quoting this one, and I think I'd be a lot more profitable, as everybody would probably agree, if I had 40 or 50 houses in this development. And, when I zoom out, there's plenty of them, and they all have fairly similar lot sizes. So rather than quote every one and worry about every sort of nickel and dime, I'm going to want to look at how can I put a package together with this proposal and deliver it to the entire area. And now I'm confident because I put the time into building one that was really strong for this one property. But let's put a package out where I can really get route densification across the whole neighborhood. And I think this is where, creating more of a generic quote and putting it into the system without a name and address and just and obviously print it without a name. There's no problem doing that. Or you can make a name called your 2020 landscape proposal. And then when you put that out to everybody, you can quote it with sort of the base monthly package and round the numbers off so it's a little easier to look at, and then add all the options below. And those options, if you put the time into it once in that one neighborhood, it's going to be a lot easier for you to submit to hundreds of people later. And again, I would advise, keep a nice clean section for your base monthly packages, and then add lots of features, lots of options that they can choose in addition, whether that be mulching or fertilizer, weed control. The list is endless. Pruning, weekly, spring and fall cleanups. Everybody's good at coming up with lists of services. I think where a lot of landscapers maybe don't put enough time in is just kind of figuring out a way to duplicate that and really work on route densification, because that's where a lot of the opportunity lives after all. And again, if you've taken the time to really analyze that quote, you can really look here and say, the houses in this neighborhood are really kind of going to fall within this $7,000 a year package if they sign up for mulch and the whole thing. And if I want to build 100 homes on my route, I could kind of quickly say, well, the potential value of 100 homes in that neighborhood or in that general area and lot size would be $700,000 in business. So with a 12.8% profit. So I think often using estimates like this to kind of create the ideal scenario and the perfect package really drives our sales initiatives next, which would be focusing on route densification, focusing our marketing efforts in these specific areas, and really sort of making sure that we've got a profitable price before we do that. And I think it's a lot easier when you create the templates so that you can bid these jobs using simple measurements as opposed to having to think everything through each time you prepare a price. Because as we've seen, it's too easy to make mistakes when pricing or when sending others out to do pricing, because often, calculating chemicals and fertilizer and labor on the spot is a difficult thing to do. So at any point, once I'm preparing this estimate, if I want to, change my profit margin, if I wanted to say, I want to override my profit and make this 15% on every line item, I could easily do that as well. Kind of look at the quote. If I don't feel that I have enough profit, I can adjust my number of payments and say this is an 8-month contract. I can do all kinds of things here to kind of customize it. But in the end, I think what we're kind of driving at is just wanted to kind of show how easy it is to create an estimate and just kind of talk through some best practices of creating those work area templates to make it fast and systemizable. But that was all I wanted to cover for today. If there's any questions, we'll cover those next. And hopefully that was helpful for some of you who might be quoting this type of work this time of year.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. We have some questions here for you. I started the webinar here a little bit late, but can I offer different service options without having to create another estimate?
Different service options? Yes, absolutely. Anytime you want to go back in and I think I understand the question, right? But modify the estimate. We could always, add more services. Or when it comes to service options, I think perhaps the question might be referring to, the billing type, which would be per visit, per season, per hour, per unit. Very easy to go back and change that. If, let's say, you're presenting a quote and the customer decides to opt in or out of a service, it's very easy to log back in and make those changes. I'm not sure if I understand the question completely, but I hope that answers it.
We're getting a thumbs up, so I think you answered the question great. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, next question. How do I add a contract to LMN that I sold prior to starting LMN? Is there a way to override price for the services?
Well, yeah, absolutely. You can custom price in the system, and that's fairly easy to do. But we still recommend when you're adding your new or setting up an existing contract for the first time, that you go in and build it out in the system. And there's a few reasons we recommend that. First off, we think that it gives you more awareness around how profitable the job is or isn't. So ideally set it up as if you're pricing the job, even though it's an existing contract, and assign the labor and material accordingly and see what the price should be. Now, let's just say that there's a problem and maybe you underpriced it in the past, but you still want to track it in the system and you want to use the system to its fullest capacity. I'm just going to kind of open up weekly mowing here as an example. We can, at any point, we can override and just sort of enter the price. So if you've already quoted it, we can certainly do that here by just adjusting the unit price. So although the system has told me the price should be $54, if I'm already charging the customer $60, I can override it and just put $60 in. And now it's telling me that I'm charging $60 and I'm actually making 22.9%, which would be a win. But let's say, unfortunately, we priced this job years ago, we've had it forever, and we're only charging $40 for that service. I could say, well, I'm losing 15% right now if I hold my price at $40. And sometimes, often contractors haven't priced equipment into their jobs in the past as an individual item. So let's just show it like this. We're not charging for our crew truck and maintenance trailer, or we don't know how we're charging for it. So I zeroed that and I know I'm charging $40 per cut. This is telling me that I'm losing 15% right now on the labor. And if I said I was charging $1 for my truck, it would tell me I'm further losing almost 2,000% on my truck. So important to note that this little unit price is built into the system for you to override, but also for you to fact check your existing pricing and see what that profitability is. So that little tool allows you to check how profitable your pricing is on the fly if you've got existing contracts. Hopefully that helped.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. Residential maintenance. Any tips for dealing with lowball competitors?
Yeah, I mean, my own sort of experience there is there's always going to, particularly in residential maintenance, there's always going to be kind of the mow and blow contractor that does everything extremely cheap, and they might actually be able to, if they have really good root densification, and still make good profit. But the key thing that I would say is you have to differentiate yourself when you're selling landscape maintenance. The better your package is, the more effort that you put into these client notes and that I described earlier, the more options that you provide on your price. I would keep the weekly mowing perhaps as your base monthly contract, and then option out everything else if you're trying to compete with those type of contractors. Whereas if you already have a really sort of deep client list and you're not looking to grow and you're not really competing as much, I would maybe try packaging up a little bit more. But I'll always say that, the lower the base monthly price and the more options you offer, the easier it is to expand your customer list and drive profitability, because in all of your options, I feel it's easier to charge more and at a much higher profit percentage within your options, because the customers pay less attention to those than they do to the base monthly account. So the best way to compete with those lowballers is compete with them on the weekly price, but make sure that you've got customers that are going to opt in for more features as they go. And if you've got customers that are just never taking any additional services, then I would say each year, those are the ones where you raise the monthly price, because you're not getting the profitability out of the add-on services or enhancements. Any other questions?
We've got one more here, Mark. I recently received an email about the new estimating marketplace. How is that going to work with the current item catalog?
It's going to be pretty simple, really. When you're in your estimate and you go to your catalog, I'll just sort of open up weekly mowing here. When you click on add items and templates, right now, when you go into material, you've got your various catalogs. When you go into equipment, you've got my equipment and the equipment store. And the equipment store right now is really the Caterpillar lineup of equipment. And for design build and tender build contractors, this was a really popular feature. People really liked this. They were getting quotes and getting rental rates and all these great features from here in the system. And that kind of prompted us to say, hey, why don't we build this out for both equipment and material for all types of contractors? And so what we've been doing is we've been working literally with thousands of vendors to have them upload their material catalogs or their equipment catalogs, depending on what type of business they're in, on a portal that they access, so that when you're in these catalogs, you'll see one, rather than it say my equipment and equipment store, it'll say my equipment and marketplace equipment. And when you're in material, it'll do the same thing. It'll say my materials, but right next to it, there'll be marketplace materials. So when you search, you'll be able to search vendor catalogs in your area, always in your area. You'll set the distance that you're willing to travel to order materials or pick up or to get materials delivered. And what that's going to do is just bring up all the material suppliers or equipment suppliers in your area and make that super easy for you to estimate without phoning around and collecting pricing from dozens of vendors. So we need your help on this one. We need you to reach out to your suppliers and make sure that they are in the system. And then, of course, if you have any vendors that you want in the system who aren't reacting, you can always reach out to your LMN advisor, and we'll reach out to them for you and sort of prompt them to get added into the system.
That's great.
Any
Thank
other
you, Mark. We just had
questions?
one more. There's a company here wanting to know they also do design, build, install work. Will you be covering any webinars specific to estimating for this type of work?
Yeah, absolutely. So this month, we're doing 4 of these estimating webinars, and I'll definitely be doing a design build webinar just like this one, just to kind of run through what it would look like to build up a proposal, and how to sort of take advantage of using the system best to kind of expedite that, systemize it, and kind of make the best use out of LMN's estimating software.
That's great. Thanks very much, Mark.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining. And again, I'll be back next week, same time, same place, and we'll do this again.